Hi, it's Maria, and my camera shut off during the middle of part 9, and so I'm starting over. This is part 10, and so this is the second half of part 9, and I'm just going to call this part 10. And the title of this one was "The Fastest Way to an Inheritance," but in any event, I don't know if it's Mercury retrograde or what it is, but anyway, we're just going to continue. And what I was trying to do was to concisely explain the different aspects of litigation that I had been entangled in and some of the machinations that were going on. And so I think I was in the middle of discussing the bankruptcy that I had filed for in order to erase the judgment, the $9.7 million judgment against me for defamation. And it is definitely what I consider a bogus judgment because I was tried on a letter I didn't write or send. And so my understanding is, and it has nothing to do with going to law school, but my understanding is you can't really sue someone for a letter they didn't write, right? Just kind of makes sense. But the judge there, in any event, said that she had to believe that I was actually afraid in order for her to erase that. And I have for years explained that I had been threatened repeatedly during my marriage, and that I was terrified, actually, of what he was capable of doing. And so I think that I think it takes a lot of courage for those of us who actually disclose what we've been going through, because so many of us were raised not to make an issue of things and to just kind of sugarcoat things or to put it under the rug or whatever and not really explain what really goes on behind closed doors. And I think that's the beauty of the Why Me movement, is that women are starting to tell the truth, and as to the oppression, the subjugation, and the abuse, really, and the sexual harassment that many of us, I certainly have had my share, um, many of us have experienced for whatever reason. And so, and really, I wasn't even talking about that. This is the legal issues that, in terms of a marriage and a divorce, and trying to extricate oneself from a very abusive marriage. And I don't think we should be penalized for that. I think we should be applauded, actually. But nonetheless, let's see what, I don't want to lose my train of thought here. So in the divorce, my son that I received sole custody of insisted to the judge that he had heard my ex-husband threaten me, and that he was terrified for me and also terrified for himself. And because of that, the judge did not require him to even have to see his father. And so I had 100% custody there. Now, because of this bankruptcy, the judge said she needed to see if, in fact, that was true now in terms of my writing the letter. And so so my son, actually, in a deposition with his father, said that he never said that. And so we actually had a copy of the transcript from before, and but he denied it. And so the judge didn't believe me. The judge said, well, and actually my attorney just happened to feel really nauseated that day and said, I don't know if I can really represent you today. It was a 2-day trial. And so he was so sick that he couldn't even read the transcript of the divorce case where my son said, yes, in fact, I'm terrified for my mother. And so the judge said something to the effect of, well, she probably wasn't afraid, right? Because he didn't kill her anyway. I mean, she's sitting right here. And again, I'm paraphrasing because I don't have my notes of what I heard her say. So I'm not sure, though, if she didn't believe that I were threatened, or if she didn't believe that I was afraid after being threatened, either one. In any event, it doesn't really matter because I lost, and she did not excuse the $10 million judgment. And so what's interesting about this whole thing is that my father, um, my father would be livid if he were still alive. He died the following year. He died actually subsequent to the trial, but I believe prior to the judgment, prior to the ruling. And there was a year lapse in that. The judge had a year to make a ruling. And she did it the day before her time was up. So, something is on my phone. Okay. And so, um, so, and the reason why my father would be so livid is because in his trust, he had something called the spendthrift clause. And the spendthrift clause prohibits anyone from taking even a penny of an inheritance to be used to satisfy any legal judgment. So therefore, all these trials and all this stuff that was going on, and moving vans coming and taking things and all kinds of stuff, not one penny should have gone to my ex. Certainly not the $1.5 million just in condos alone. But so that it's a good thing my father didn't have to see what type of corruption was actually in the face of his own estate. And so he was just trying to protect himself. But there were just too many things and too many attorneys involved and too much stuff going on. And if you've been involved in any legal situation, there are motions and petitions and pleadings and all kinds of situations, and it's a lot of depositions and all kinds of stuff like that, right? And so anyway, after that, there was the 2010, there was the estate litigation. And so my father and I, we knew that the ex was strategizing to get my inheritance. And so in order to protect that, I hired an attorney along with my father. I think my father was supporting me in doing that. But wait, because this attorney then said, you know what, there are just too many weird things going on in your case. And he said, I'm going to resign. And I thought, oh, great. Now just leave me to the crocodiles, or whatever they say. And so I guess he wanted out before we lost. And so what I've said in earlier parts of this series, Forgiveness to Love, is that after that, subsequent to that, I interviewed about 12 different law firms in and around where I lived in Florida. And in fact, not one would take my case. Not one would represent me. And in fact, finally, it was either the 10th or the 11th one. But he said to me, Maria, he said, don't take this personally, but not one attorney in the entire state of Florida will represent you. And I thought, oh, I don't understand what that meant, because I really didn't. And I just thought, I live in the United States of America, where I'm entitled to legal representation, right? So otherwise, the whole thing was just a moot point, right? Because it was designed. All the litigation, I think, was designed just to bury me to some extent, to just weaken me, and to certainly destitute me financially, and possibly emotionally and mentally, and perhaps even spiritually, because when you're just so bombarded by from every angle it appeared, it felt like that to me. Uh, what do? You don't want to give up, and yet, you're just not going to go and continue being a target, right? And so when authorities told me to leave Chicago after the divorce, I did, and I went to Florida. And so now I was basically seeing that for me, Florida was an unwelcoming place, if I can put it that way. And so where was I to go? And the only thing I could think of was that I went to Brazil for 2 weeks to pray, and I was only too glad to get away and to be as far away as possible. And it was clear that my family was going to steal my things, whether I was in Florida or whether I was, at the grocery store, or whether I had run an errand, or whether I was, on a different continent. So that was when my sibling changed the locks to my home and sold my parents' condo, of which supposedly I had 50% interest in, and then my son sold my condo, which I had 100% interest in, and so then everything. So then I really had what I carried in my purse, and that was all I had, and the clothes on my back, basically. But at that point, my significant other and I, who I'd been with for a couple of years, and I decided that there was no reason to stay in Florida unless we were going to pitch a tent, right? And so we said, let's just travel a little bit. So we went to Asheville. It's Asheville, North Carolina, and I get that confused because Ashland, Oregon, and I lived there most recently, and so. After, and it rained. Oh, it rained in Asheville, North Carolina, like for 2 months straight. And so we said, oh my gosh, I think that this is a message from the universe. I think God is saying, you know what, this is not the place for you. So he had a friend who had a summer home on Shebig Island in Maine. And so we went there, and then in October, when it was going to be a sheet of ice, we left and we ended up going to California. And so subsequent to that, well, I'll tell you, in California, I have an uncle and an aunt that live there. It's my father's brother. And my father always said, your uncle, I am your uncle's executor, and your uncle doesn't have any children, your uncle and aunt, and they've decided that half of their estate will go to you and your sister, and the other half will go to his wife's side of the family. And this is what my father had represented to me. And he said, if you're ever in a bind or you ever need anything, just know that your uncle is there for you, your uncle and your aunt. So we decided to go to California, and we met with them. And it was an interesting exchange because we had summered together every summer. One summer would be in California. My family and I would fly out there, my parents and I, and we'd fly out there and spend time in California. And then the subsequent year, we would all go to Greece. We'd go to Europe because that's where my uncle and my father had all their relatives. They had no relatives in the United States, and so they really missed their family. So we actually, with that aunt and uncle, I spent virtually every summer with them, and then they even flew out for my wedding, and so I thought we were very close. But they said, I explained my situation, and they said, we're not going to leave you anything in our inheritance, and your inheritance, it's not going to happen here. And I said, okay. I mean, it's their money, right? They can do whatever they want with it. I mean, they've changed their mind. And so they said, because we've gotten several phone calls from your sister, sibling, I call her sibling, from your sibling and your son, saying that you're just a terrible person, and that, you have addictions, and you're a liar, and you're a thief, and your father wrote you out of the will, and I don't know, and all whatever else they could come up with. A nut and a slut is what the divorce attorneys use on women. And so I wasn't sure what the sibling and the son, how they were describing me, but it didn't really matter. Probably delusional, because they seem to use that word a lot. And I think a lot of it has to do with my spirituality, because um, they don't quite understand from where I come. However, um, I couldn't imagine not um, I just couldn't imagine not feeling so connected to the energy of all that is, of my Creator, of my God, of the universe, and of all the heavenly beings, and all the loving angelic entities. I think that's just a wonderful thing. Anyway, I'm not so arrogant as to think that we are the only planet inhabited in this galaxy of many galaxies, and in this universe of multiple universes and megaverses and multiverses and omniverses and an omniverse. And so anyway, that's just my personal philosophy. But to try to take an inheritance from me because of my spiritual perspective, I guess it worked. Unless it was just the nut and the slut part. I don't really know, because that's just not true. But anyway, what else can I tell you here? I don't want to go off track here. But so then after that, I was running out of money. Like, really. I had a small IRA that I had taken with me to Brazil, and I had used it all on our boarding and our flights, and then on our travels cross country to get to California. And so after that, and I had rented an apartment for 6 months. And so after that, and every job we tried to get, we were shut down. So every door, it seemed, was closing. And that was probably just the way it was supposed to be, because we weren't to settle there. And so after that, he left and ultimately went to France. And I actually went into homeless shelters. And so I didn't know. I had recently heard that my ex had died in 2015 or 2016, but I don't know that for a fact, because no one will tell me, and it's probably because of the Social Security survivor benefits that I am a beneficiary of, that I am to get. And yet it's been, 5 years now, and I haven't gotten a penny of that, because I can't come up with a death certificate. And I wondered how this interplayed with something I saw on the internet, which was my son, the oldest son, the one that took my home. He has an alias, and it's PG Scott, and his initials are PG, and my ex-husband's first name was Scott. So I thought, oh, okay, PG is somehow taking on the persona of Scott, of his father, of my ex. And so I just wasn't sure how all of this was all working together. I didn't understand it, and I still really don't. And then I read that that my ex was employed by a firm, and they had pictures of all the other employees except for my ex. So that further validated to me that, in fact, he had transitioned. He had died, but no one told me anything. So, and I couldn't get a copy of a death certificate, so I couldn't get those Social Security things. But I think that partly, maybe the reason why his death was kept quiet is because there were several people that he was after. I wasn't the only one. So I was the easiest target, right? Because I married him and I had the money. But there were several people that throughout his employment career, he, had kind of locked horns with, or butt heads with. And so he kind of liked, we're talking about narcissists and everything. And so sometimes narcissists feel very entitled, and they belittle other people. And one thing I noticed about my ex is that when I would be in pain, he would laugh, and the probably the most obvious example I can give you of that is one day I was driving nursery school carpool, and I went to this little girl's home and I was ringing the doorbell for her to come out so I could drive her to school. And lo and behold, it was a beautiful sunshiny day in May, and all of a sudden I was drenched, and I was taken aback for an instant, and I thought, oh my goodness, well, where is this coming from? I don't see rain clouds. And I saw to the left of this home, I saw landscapers, and they were holding hoses, and they were spraying the trees and the bushes with what appeared to be a pesticide, an insecticide, and they drenched me. So they came around the corner, and I was standing on the porch, and and so I was really ill that night. I drove the kids to nursery school carpool, and then that night I was actually crawling on the floor, and I was vomiting and heaving, and it felt as if my chest, my torso, were in a sieve of some sort, because I just felt like I was being squeezed. It was just, I could barely breathe, and my throat became really raw, and I was getting dizzy, and I was delirious, and I was on the floor of my bathroom, and I don't know, I guess they call them an out of body experience, and so I actually detached from my body. It felt like, and I was up here because this was my vantage point, and I'm looking down at myself, on the floor, and heaving and vomiting, and just I could barely crawl. And I noticed that my ex-husband was standing in the door frame right next to the commode. And he's standing in the door frame, and his hands were kind of holding up the door frame. They were just up there. And he's kind of laughing. And I thought, oh my God, I feel like I'm dying, and you're laughing at me. And so he said, don't you ever, ever tell anyone about what happened, about that spraying, because if you do, I'll deny it. And I'll just say you're delusional. And so, for 5 years, I listened to that. I just didn't want to be known as delusional, I guess, or I didn't want to be, I really didn't want my view of reality denied by someone else. And so, when I go to doctors, I'd say, oh, I've got this horrible sore throat and I can barely breathe or whatever. And even one of my trips to the Mayo Clinic, I didn't say, I said, diagnose me, because I became the woman in the bubble. I became allergic to everything, including an EpiPen. I don't know of anybody that's been allergic to an EpiPen too, but my body was totally shutting down. And if the slow poisoning that my ex-husband said he had been perpetrating since shortly after our honeymoon, if that didn't finish me off, this pesticide was to do the job. But in any event, I couldn't get the right help because I wasn't truthful. I didn't tell the people what exactly was happening, because I was so confused too, and I kept getting sicker and sicker. And pretty soon, I was wearing a heart monitor under my clothes, and I was practically passing out daily, and everything I ate was just making me sick. And so, it's called an environmental illness. And as I think about it, yes, everything in my environment was toxic to me, as was my ex-husband. And so here's a story for you. In Chicago, Chicago's a very social town, and there are many lovely people there, and there are many cultural and charity events and things like that, and dinner parties and things. And so I those were my friends, and so I because I was so fragile, and because I attended And for my ex-husband's career, we attended many functions like that. And so caterers would tell me, oh, we'll fix you anything you want, we'll prepare it any way you want. And I'd say, no, I couldn't even take a chance on that. So I would I would take a little bag with me, a little gold bag with me, and I would bring my food, so that the caterers could plate it, so that I wasn't the only one sitting there not eating while everybody else is having this fabulous, multi-course meal. And so I remember someone sent me something that was in one of those columnists, one of those gossip columnists or social columnists or whatever it was, and it says, "Who's this? The Chicago socialite that brings a little gold bag with her food to black ties." And I thought, I know that sounds kind of funny, doesn't it? And so, because I think socialites are pretty well sheltered, and so I don't think that they're visiting homeless shelters, and I don't think that they lose like every court case they have, and lose as much as I've lost. But in any event, that was a different part of my life then, and my ex had said, if you leave, I will destroy you. And so he really did kind of make good on his threats. And yet I can turn this around into like this was the most fabulous and interesting life I could have ever imagined, because had I still been sheltered in a mansion someplace, I would never have experienced all all the experiences that have allowed me to grow in ways that I was able to really tap into some spiritual teachers, and I am so grateful to their wisdom, um, and their having been awakened in order to share some of the gems and the jewels that they have in terms of our life on planet Earth. It's really it's quite a trip, isn't it? And so anyway, as I was yeah, the woman in the bubble, my heart was skipping beats, and my blood pressure would dip so low, and I was passing out. And anyway, I finally found a an immunologist in New York City who put me back together. Yes, put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And so that was wonderful, and that kind of changed my life too, because I never knew about that I was really being poisoned. And so that was the piece of the puzzle that was missing, because had I known that I was being slowly poisoned for 20 years, I I would have, oh, maybe it was less than that, because I was married 9 years when the pesticide drenching happened, and he was poisoning me before that. Maybe he was poisoning me after, but I was hardly eating after because I was so allergic. But anyway, um, that was the puzzle piece, because they had wanted to diagnose me with MS, and then all these other Meniere's, and several um, other diseases, because they couldn't figure out what was the matter with me. But it was the neurotoxin that had affected my nervous system, notwithstanding several organs as well, because I was hospitalized for acute pancreatitis after that as well. But you know what? That was the puzzle piece. And so all of these things, when we have all these health challenges, I have to say that it really changed my life, because I became very cognizant of what I was ingesting. So everything I would eat and drink, I was really careful. And I think that allowed me to just really cleanse myself and improve my life. And sometimes, things happen, and yes, we can on the one hand think that they're tragic. On the other hand, we can say, well, gosh, I learned so much from that. And as long as there isn't any residual damage, it was an experience that, yes, was painful at the time, and yet, in retrospect, not to have the knowledge that I gained during that time would have been the tragedy, really, because I learned so much. And so let's see. I guess I guess I'm going to end this here. And this is forgiveness to love, and you will see exactly, who does these things and what is the solution. Who do we forgive? Who do we need to forgive? And how do we cope? And what do we do? And who are we really to create? How can we create a life of joy and peace and contentment, um, notwithstanding um, love? Because that's what it's all about. And every person who has been part of my journey, um, I have to say that it has allowed me to grow. Even now, I think was it 8 or 9? I think it was 8. Um, that one was titled "Flying Monkeys in Florida," and so yes. I have been harassed, and there have been so many flying monkeys. And flying monkeys are from The Wizard of Oz, and they're the Wicked Witches of the West. Well, they're her. I call them the what is it? The gruesome minions or whatever, the babbling minions, and they're the clueless minions as well, because they don't even realize the harm that they do. But the people that I know, my family has hired to stalk me and to cause me pain, and still to poison my food. I know that that's going on because I can feel it in my body. I'm very sensitive in my body because of the health challenges that I've had. And so I have to say that I think that um, what we don't experience here in the physical, in terms of karma, we do experience emotionally and mentally and spiritually. And so I am a great believer in karma. And I do believe that it is up to us to send out as much positive energy as possible, and to appreciate all that we've gone through, and to have gratitude for all the blessings that we have been given in this lifetime. And so with that in mind, I urge you to take my story, but to take it from a perspective where my story is your story. And whatever you've gone through, you can overcome it, and you can come out and be so much better for it, for having experienced all that you've experienced, because this was the path of your soul. You didn't really experience anything that your soul didn't want you to experience. Certainly, that's my belief. And that when we go through certain things that other people would think, oh my gosh, how, that's just the worst thing in the world. Well, you know what? We get through it, and we're stronger for it, whether it's really in the physical or energetically. And so raise your vibration is what they say. We raise our frequency, because we are energetic beings. And I know this probably sounds a little too woo-woo, but I think my audience is pretty woo-woo. And so anyway, it is truly the truth, my truth. And so anyway, I wish you a beautiful evening, and thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time on number 11. Right? Yes, number 11. Bye.